Do you want the heart of Jesus? You need his habits. And Jesus prayed. And it wasn't so much for the results, although results happened. It was for the relationship. The Father was so eager to welcome his Son. And the Father is eager to welcome you too. There are moments of great testing in your life that are coming. And it's just going to be you and God and the devil. And who are you going to be like? If you want to be like Jesus, you need to pursue his habits. I'll show you 4. 1 was solitude. And by solitude, I mean intentional time in quiet with just you and God. Solitude is not being alone. Solitude is being alone with God. And Jesus consistently created space to silence all the noise around him so he could hear the voice above him. He did this all the time. It says, Luke 5, he often withdrew to the wilderness to pray. Why did he go there? Why can't you pray anywhere? Well, you can. I can talk anywhere, even in a loud, noisy room, but I can't listen well everywhere. Years ago, when Mother Teresa was interviewed on 60 Minutes, she was asked about her habits, and she mentioned her practice of daily prayer. And she was asked, and what do you say in your prayers? And she said, I don't say anything. I listen. Because if your relationship with anybody is just you do all the talking, it's not going to get very deep. Now, I think we would all agree that having a full schedule is not the same thing of having life to the full. That nowhere in the Bible do we read, be busy and know that I am God. And yet most of us are living our lives at a pace our rabbi would not tolerate. We are wearing ourselves out with a schedule that leaves no time for the wilderness. And you know I'm going to go there. One of the things that's making it really hard to be like Jesus are these. We are the first generation to try to follow Jesus who has access to noise every second. None of our ancestors in the faith for 2,000 years lived this way. Life gave them every day times of aloneness and times of quiet. We don't have to do that anymore. We can have noise 24/7. No one has ever tried to follow Jesus this way until us. And the early returns have not been very encouraging. And I would suggest to you, in my many years as a pastor, that when I see people who are stunted in their spiritual growth, more often than not, the problem is not persistent disobedience. It is constant distraction. So when and where does God ever get your full attention? Don't skip lightly over that question. Answer it. When and where does God ever get your full attention? It's not easy, is it? 2 places that I've tried to carve out in my life. I like to take walks every day. I like to start my walk in prayer, listening to worship music, and then maybe scripture, and then somewhere on the walk, I just turn it off. And say, God, okay, God, the rest of the time it's just you and me. I'm listening if you want to say something. The other thing I'm trying is my car. Like you, I spend 30 minutes to an hour every day in a car. And I have found you do not have to have noise on to get where you want to go. You can get in your car and just say, God, come ride with me. I'm listening. I'm not saying you need to do what I do, I'm saying you cannot be like Jesus if you don't pursue his habits. And if you want to seek the presence of God, you must be willing to join him in the silence. Jesus practiced solitude. He practiced prayer. It's interesting, if anyone ever lived who probably needed to commune with God less, you might think it would be Jesus, and yet he was committed most to doing so. It's a practice he made time for. For example, Mark 1, it says, before daybreak the next morning. Okay, this is before street lights. This is before lamps. I mean, it is dark, and where does he go? He goes to the wilderness. He makes his way out there in pitch black dark to that isolated place to pray. This was his constant practice. Before important decisions like choosing his disciples, Jesus would find a place to pray. It says, Luke 6, one day soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. Full disclosure, I've never done that. I've been in some prayer meetings that lasted several hours. I have never prayed all night to God. Now, Jesus told his disciples to do a lot of things they had never done before, like preach or heal the sick or cast out demons. But one thing they had done before they ever met Jesus is pray. I mean, as Jewish boys, they'd been praying all their life. But when they start following Jesus, the one thing they ask him to do is, Master, teach us to pray. And I'm going to suggest there was something so extraordinary about his public or his outer life with people that they connected it to his inner life. You know people like that? I bet you do. I bet you know some people, their outer life, the way they deal with people, the way they deal with life, they are so full of calm and peace and joy that you just know they must spend a lot of time alone with God. And so, Master, teach us to pray. Why? Because we want to become like Jesus. This was such a priority in what we read about the Christians in the very first few centuries. I mean, they were disciplined prayer warriors. They were devoted to prayer. It says Acts chapter 2. The first 3 centuries of the church, the headquarters were Africa. And they tell stories about the people had the daily habit of going off to the thicket and finding their spot where they would pour out their heart to God. And you would go so often, you'd wear a trail in the thicket. And people would know if a brother had gotten negligent in his prayer, and they would come up to him and they would say, brother, the grass grows on your path. Is the grass growing on your path? Do you have a path? Do you want the heart of Jesus? You need his habits. And Jesus prayed. And it wasn't so much for the results, although results happened. It was for the relationship. The Father was so eager to welcome his Son. And the Father is eager to welcome you too. And so Jesus practiced solitude and prayer.